All right. Well, welcome back, everybody, to Chestnut Checkers. I am Keith Riddle, and this is Jordan Tampien, my co-host. And today I have a guest who's actually been a longtime friend of mine, Anton Stetner. Say hello, Anton.
Hello. Thank you for having me, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you. Doing this virtually with us here. So, where are you at today? Are you in the work studio, home studio? What are you doing?
Yeah, this is just in the office. I got a quick little studio you can pop into here in the office. And what's funny is, in like an hour and a half, I'm gonna go over to the other studio and go record my podcast. So, I mean, I get it.
Where's your other studio?
My friend Benji has one right in town. It's
nice.
actually like it's a converted garage, basically.
Nice. And you are in
Yeah.
the Marysville area, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I'm in Marysville, about 30 minutes north of Seattle.
Nice. And for our guests that don't know, I'm going to just get this out of the way right away because I feel like you're more internet famous than we are.
Like I'm gonna say likely.
Likely, but well, no, Anton, you got on the YouTube train, and you've had a podcast for a while, and you've got quite the presence, over like 1 million views on your podcast. I think you told me that like maybe a year ago or something. So you're probably well beyond that. Tell me a little bit about your internet YouTube journey podcast. How did you get into that? When did you start that? How's that going?
No, I mean, all that's a really good question, and on a certain level, you're making me sound cooler than I am. So, I own a Keller Williams. Actually, I'm an investor in 2 of them. But in 2009,
which is a real estate brokerage for all of our non-real estate followers.
Yeah,
we're in real estate.
In 2009, one of our brokers was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go help my wife work on her YouTube channel full time," and I was like, "Oh, that's a bad idea." Well, what happened was they ended up becoming like massive influencers in the YouTube space. It turned into a 7-digit business for them. And
was that Benji?
And that's Benji.
Okay.
Yeah, Benji Travis. And so Benji's my co-host. And Benji over the years has basically just come back to me and said, "Brother, you have to do this. Brother, you have to do this." We have another friend, Sean Cannell, the owner of Think Media. "Hey, do this, do this." They both have large YouTube businesses. And finally, I was like, "Yeah, we need to do this on a regular basis." And Benji and I were working on a development deal together anyway. So we were talking like once or twice a week anyway. He's like, "Hey, just come over to the studio. Let's just start recording." So really what happened was we started getting into a kind of a routine and a process. And then hired some outside
by like happenstance, like just kind of it sounds like you just subtly did it.
Yeah, just eased into it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you guys are entrepreneurs. You know how it goes. You're like, let's think about doing this, and then all of a sudden, you've got a whole business running behind it.
That's true.
So you basically and when you started, so Benji obviously got into it, and then you started. Were you guys doing just basically real estate type content? Or were you doing?
Yeah, so that's what we do on a regular basis. We basically do real estate, finance, economics, land development, real estate investing.
Nice. You sticking in the wheelhouse that you know.
Sticking in the wheelhouse we know, and to be honest, the stuff I enjoy talking about. If you're not going to be super happy having a conversation on a regular basis, like it's not going to last.
So when was that? How long ago? Like, mark me.
We've been doing it for 2 years, and then. Like total, if you bring in all social platforms, it's doing about 250,000 views a month. If you like take in all social platforms, when you look at the actual podcast itself, the podcast may get anywhere between 200 views to 4,000, so it kind of just depends on what really happens. One of the things I think that people don't, we do this so often in life and business is we don't want to plant the seed and till the field and work the crop, in order to get it. And if you're going to play this internet game, you got to be willing to just work at it for a few years, and then all of a sudden the results will start to show up. So it's just been a real slow. And then I would say in the last few months, it's definitely started like increasing significantly.
What do you think was the biggest change for that? Just consistency, and then it just hit one day?
No, but it's not like even just hitting. And then my goals are different than other people.
Okay.
So a lot of people want to be internet famous. My goal is very simple. I want people to know, like, love, and trust me, who happen to have capital, who want to play in real estate. And so for me, it's just another vehicle to build relationships. So we can do more investing, more land development deals, buy more things.
It's an incubator to your current business.
Yeah, incubator.
Well, and just to help, because obviously you and Keith know each other, can you give us just a quick backstory? Catch everybody up, because obviously you hit my keywords: real estate, land, developing.
Jordan is like, who is this guy again?
So because you can
he's
Google
his friend on, and now he's speaking my language.
Yeah, all of a sudden I was like, sometimes Keith, I'm like, who's coming on now? All right, but I was like, but I think it would give some context, because I think when you say those, you're not talking about taking a single family lot and putting a house on it. My assumption is there's a more dramatic piece there, and I think some context to what you do. Otherwise, you could in this thing just knowing you're a YouTube star versus all the other things.
No, he's a YouTube star after he's real estate famous.
Well, I know. So we want to hear the real estate famous that led to the YouTube star, just to give some context, because there's 5 other questions I had on that one.
Yeah, no worries. I've been a licensed real estate broker since 2003. I'm an owner in 2 KWs. We have an escrow title company. We have insurance, and we also do new construction land development, and then a sales team. I've sold thousands of homes here in the North Seattle metro, and then we currently have 18 land development projects going. Keith, everything from, we'll go do a single family to townhome projects and rural subdivisions and dadoos.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, 3 weeks ago, we made the news when someone burned down one of our projects in Everett.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Was that it was arson? It was
arson.
Arson, and was it arson out of malice, or was it just like some riffraff got in a house and were partying and burned it down, or were they like, I know Anton and I hate Anton and I'm burning his project?
I heard his podcast.
He sucks. I can't pretend to know the actual reason. The individual that got arrested, it was his 34th arrest. He had just been arrested in January for trying to light something on fire in Edmonds.
Oh, so he's like a serial arsonist.
This is, once again, I don't know, but this is a possible serial arsonist, and this is a person who's been 3 felonies, 26 misdemeanors. He picked up the leftover plumbing scraps that were sitting in, a can, and then probably just shoved them up against the wall, put accelerant on it, and just torched it.
Oh my gosh, dude, that's crazy. That's heartbreaking.
The game's hard enough as it is, let alone having to deal with protection, fire protection.
Oh golly, man, that's no good.
Well, you're still smiling, you're still doing it, so that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And what kicked it all off? Was it you did retail sales, and then once you got in, kind of owning made sense to do the next? But what was kind of the initial kickoff of the entrepreneur side? Whether that's just being your own broker, or was it one of the businesses?
That was my dad when I was a kid. My dad grew up as a farmer in Eastern Washington, and then he was a longshoreman and worked at a church. And when I was 13 or 14, we're walking through the grocery store, and I said to my dad, Dad, I want to make a lot of money. And my dad, whether this was infinite wisdom or just trying to get me to shut up, I don't know, but it was cool. He reached over and grabbed the Fortune magazine, and it was the Fortune 500 list. And he hands it to me and says, hey, go read this list and figure out what they did. And I was like, okay, well, Dad told me to. So I went home and I read the list, and I was like, entrepreneur, stock market, inherit. Well, we're not going to inherit it. And then real estate. So, I told my dad a little bit while later, I was like, hey, I'm going to go invest in real estate. And so I got into real estate to actually be an investor when I first came into the business. That was my intention. Brokerage just happened, and being a broker just happened to be the vehicle that was the gas tank for the machine to power it.
Makes sense. What was your first investment?
Yeah. In 2004, I walked into one of my investors' offices and said, brother, I got this awesome deal. You can buy it. It's a little bit below market. I think it's like 5-10% below market. It needs a little bit of rehab. It's great. And just, keep it as a rental. And he hands me a pen and says, well, you've sold me a bunch. It's time for you to buy one. And I go, and he goes, no, I'm serious. He's like, this is it. He goes, this is a trained pen. It signs contracts, and he hands it to me.
Trained pen. I like that one.
That's hilarious. So it was a single family house, and it was just a deal.
Yeah, we bought a Rambler, paid ourselves a 7% commission, bought it 0 down, wrapped in all the closing costs, got a little money back, did the rehab, turned around and rented it. Phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, so I'm going to speed this out a little bit, and one of the reasons is because I feel like I selfishly bring people on the podcast to get information that I want. So.
Smart. Smart. Actually, I think that's why you created this.
Me and Anton are friends, but he's busy just like Jordan's busy. So I did this podcast with Jordan just so I was like, then he has to talk to me once a week.
We're forced in the room.
Leave. But Anton, you obviously you play real estate now at a big level. But one of the reasons that I wanted to chat with you today, and one of the things that I'm curious about is you're very knowledgeable about what's happening right now in real estate at a high level, especially at the development level, but also in Washington State specifically. What are you doing right now, and what are you seeing based upon everything that's happened in the last? So these are 3 things that I know that you can use. You can go whatever direction you want with this, but basically, the Senate housing bill that passed last year was like 1110, the SB 1110, the middle housing bill, and then also the Growth Management Act. The UGA is expanding, right? Urban growth boundary.
It's up for expansion.
Up for expansion. So all of the municipalities in the cities have to redo their long-term growth plans, right? And so I feel like there's a lot of really exciting things happening in development, and I'm just curious as to your take on them and kind of is this stuff that's still years out? Is this stuff that what do you think you're gonna start seeing first? But like based on, I've been in real estate almost 20 years, and all of us have been in real estate, but in that amount of time, the GMA has never come up for review. Matter of fact, I don't know when the last time
it's every 10 years. So it comes up every 10.
Is it every 10?
Yeah, and it usually gets shot down because we don't have enough population growth.
In Spokane, you're referring to?
Typically. Oh, and then it's usually lobbied to add conservation to all the pieces. So there's a really Anton, you take the steam from here, but there's lobbying efforts against expanding it because the hard part is that in order to get the funding, which everyone took, you had to sign up for it.
Yes. So I think this is like a 2 or 3 part question of mine. Is like, so the Growth Management Act is its own conversation, right?
Yes.
Like, what is the Growth Management Act? When was it enacted, and for what purpose type thing? And then the urban growth boundaries and the long-term growth plans that are that's like another conversation, right? And it would be different. It would be different for every municipality that's doing them, essentially.
Yeah, let's kind of break this down real quick. So the Growth Management Act came into fruition in the 90s in order to control suburban sprawl. And the problem is they put the population projections together at that time, and then they didn't put mechanisms to identify the buildable lands inventory, the buffers, and then they didn't define the difference between like a rental unit and a like home ownership unit. And because I play in the brokerage space, even though we own a bunch of rentals, I'm so pro the American dream. We need a strong middle class. We need first-time home buyers. That the GMA on a regular basis, on a certain level, pisses me off. Now, all of us on this podcast and all of the listeners, though, they need to realize they are artificially benefiting from it. Washington State, over the last 40 years, has appreciated something like 826%. It's the number 1 in the nation.
I didn't know that.
The Growth Management Act pinches us. Yeah, it pinches us. So, and especially on my side of the mountains, I got salt water that way, the Cascades that way, and little rivers and creeks all coming down that basically pinch the buildable area. So one, they've artificially limited supply, which with high demand because of our economy and our jobs causes forced appreciation. The appreciation last year in the Seattle Metro was between 6.9 to like 9.4%, depending on where you were looking. That was with 7% interest rates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So as rates come down, of course, we'll get more appreciation. We actually sold what was our out-of-state stuff because we feel like the rest of the states weren't going to do that well, and then we brought it back home to play. In the Seattle metro, King County brought almost nothing in. Snohomish County, where I specifically live, only brought in like 3 spots. And those 3 spots only add up to not even 3,000 homes. In a county that's supposed to grow by 700,000 people by in the next 20 years or something like that. Some ridiculous number. So this makes me very bullish for our area, but realize that they don't want to add more in. So the Puget Sound Regional Council is who controls the 5-county area, which is basically like the capital to the border. Mm-hmm. They voted down almost every UGA expansion. Mm-hmm. And then, though, the problem is right now the rent control bill that's in I believe it passed the Senate yesterday.
Yeah, it did.
Okay. So we have legislation that's fighting itself where, like, we're talking about rent control when if we simply just increase supply, rent wouldn't even be that big of an issue. The other problem I have with the Growth Management Act is when we're talking about it only being a unit, we end up with these giant stacks of apartments to fill those units, which is not necessarily the best thing for society or a strong middle class.
So when you say the rent control just passed yesterday, and I'm familiar with a little bit of it, but what is the likelihood of that going all the way through? Because can they still?
It's going to go.
I think. Yeah. So if you look at the legislation, the rent control has been coming up every year, mm-hmm. and if it doesn't pass this year, it will the next or the following. It's coming. That one has a 7% cap, which on a certain level, it's just going to. Rent control, historically speaking, just simply seems to hurt because you see maintenance go down and you see rent increases become more frequent because you have to increase because you may not be able to increase the following year.
Can't make up for any non-increase years.
Yeah, and so it kills. We pivot our entire model to new construction only because what our issue was, you can't flip a C-class building now. That's where it really hurts you is because then you got to put the money in. You got to take 800 to 1,100. That's too much. You can only go up to 7%. So I actually see it hurting kind of the inventory stock that we have locally from that standpoint. The other issue they take is that rent has to include, like our insurance went up 32% and rent's flatlined.
Crazy.
And so like at some point I always wonder, I mean, different topic, different time, but it's like if it ever turns into like commercial situations when you rent and every residential tenant's a triple net tenant.
Yeah.
Because they're going to hit a point where if you're going to cap the rent, the expenses don't cap.
Bingo.
And so, anyways, super interesting. But you're right. I talked to the lobbyists here, and they're like, it'll pass in some form. And I think it's just like to your point, it's super insightful and it's counterintuitive. You just have competing interests. Like Spokane for 4 straight years went up 22% in appreciation.
Wow.
So like a house I helped somebody buy for $250, almost 5 years later was worth $500.
Yeah.
And I was like. And it's because of those pieces. Like there's only every piece of land I know is spoken for in our current boundary to develop. Yeah. It's owned, it's spoken for, it's owned by the people that will build it. There's a ton of pressure to never expand it.
100%.
And so it's a super awkward piece of it. So
where does it go? I mean, like if you guys had a crystal ball, like how do you? So I mean, obviously you're heading towards a train wreck, is what I hear. But where does the train wreck? Like how do you?
It just makes it unaffordable.
The train is wrecking. Yeah. The train is off the rails right now.
So you think it's already past that?
Yeah, I mean, because it's gonna take years to make up for it. So even if they pass it, like, nobody can effectively do anything until 2027.
Yeah. So. Basically, and once again, I only know the Seattle metro really well. In our area, what's going to happen is the single-family home is now on the endangered species list. You only see townhomes and multifamily, and and all of your single family homes will start at somewhere around 25% above the median price, because that will be the only level at which you can afford to build them and make a profit.
So yeah, because of the infrastructure costs and because of the build costs and the development.
100%.
Well, the land value, like the theory was good, right? It keeps that land value high. The issue is with no cap to it, you lost control, and their mechanism is too slow to ever move to correct it, and so it'll end up driving prices. If we thought prices were high now, if they don't expand it, that's 10 more years of only the current stuff. So then now you're gonna have to buy a house. If you buy a house on the South Hill right now, so our South Hill's nice area. 500 grand probably doesn't even get you on there. Let's say it's 650. The only way to ever buy that is, to your point, is buy it, tear it down, and put 4 townhomes in the same spot to ever make it worth it. And if you don't do that, there's never any growth. So you can never accommodate more families. And so then so go ahead.
So Keith was alluding to like so there's the doom and the gloom. And then if you flip it over though, like what's the opportunity? So the opportunity is in, House Bill 1337 and 1110, which is middle housing and your DADU bills. Also, one that looks like it might make it through this year would be the lot splitting bill. The lot splitting bill will basically allow a 2-lot subdivision. That's working its way through right now. It appears to have support in the Senate. 2-lot subdivisions clog up a county or a city when they're inside their UGA because they take just as much work, and what they're doing is they're trying to make that just a quick administrative approval so it could be done in less than 90 days. Draw the line, look at it, go, okay, looks good, slap some frontage on it, bam, instead of going through the whole process. So that is one thing that could create additional things for the small to medium-sized developer. What's cool for the listeners, for us on this podcast, is that middle housing, DADUs, and lot splitting actually favor the small investor and the medium-sized investor versus the D.R. Hortons and KB Homes of America. Because those national builders, they've got to have 15, 20 units to even take a look at it, and they'd prefer to have 40 or more. So they're not going to look at, like you said, buying a home, scraping it off, and building a fourplex in its place, versus that's something that we can take advantage of. So the unique opportunity is to identify properties that are in those zonings that will allow the duplexes, fourplexes, and sixplexes, or a single family home that needs rehab that you could build 2 detached accessory dwelling units, aka DADUs, in the backyard. That's massive opportunity over the next few years.
Yeah, and it's, I think in the differences between the two markets, the DADU, I was going to clarify that, detached accessory dwelling unit, right?
Yep.
They don't pencil as well in our market, and it's just because of, like you said, the infrastructure cost is so much, there's a base expense to doing it, and then the house prices over here don't necessarily support the build cost for those. You're trading dollars for dollars.
Yeah, the rents don't justify it. So one of the issues we have over here is our rents just don't justify that piece of it, is that we're capped even on a single family house of what you can get. So
it is an opportunity, I think, for like John and Jane homeowner, right? As far as like to increase equity over time,
or to get into a neighborhood you wouldn't have been in, like, because you can add that additional revenue. The hard part is if rates stay at this peak, you just can't ever make it up.
Yeah, I don't know that it's going to make a super awesome rental model, but it's a vehicle by which you can spin them and turn them for cash. So for example, we have them going in Everett, we've got them in Lake Stevens, and then the ones in Everett, you're looking at approximately 30 grand, to bring in all the utilities and cut the hole. You're about $175 a square foot. So all in hard costs, for 1,000 square foot, 3-bed, 2.5 bath, single car garage plan that we have, you're looking at about like 285 to 310, depending on the site. That sells for that sells for anywhere between 550 to 600 grand on this side.
Yeah. So ours, the hard part is ours is the same cost that you had, and that sells for 250. Right. And then that's one of the issues of a policy that makes a ton of sense for helping control an urban sprawl on the west side to an east side where we have land and have those pieces. And so it makes it, that's really the crux of the two differences, is just that rarity of land. So maximizing land makes a lot of sense. Here they let us sprawl out. Like there's valley sites that are 1 acre lots, because that's what they wanted you to do. And so,
Well, and I've got a couple of those in development right now that are 5-lot developments, 4-lot developments, and it's the same thing. It's a house on a, roughly an acre that at one point in time probably was maybe rural. Had a barn, and maybe people were allowed to have a horse or something. But essentially, it's it's prime for development with some of these new laws that are being passed. And it's not. The issue is, it seems like a lot of the building and planning divisions and a lot of the requirements and the infrastructure haven't caught up to these new laws, right? So like the city of Spokane Valley, as an example, hasn't really done anything yet based upon these changes for the Senate Bill 1110 in their building and planning division. And so that you're going down there and they're pulling out essentially this kind of like old book going, well, here's what you have to do. And it's like, well, the Senate just passed a law and it says I can do this, right? But they haven't made the infrastructure changes on the inside. And so it's actually, I think it's one of those things where nobody knows what to do. Right? You got maybe I'm trying to push the limit over here and saying I should be able to do this. They're saying, well, you can't do that. State has ruled that you can, and so you have this kind of lag, I guess you'd say, between.
I think Keith, they're actually not forced by the law to implement it until late this year.
Correct.
So
no, correct. Yeah, I'm saying it seems, but it seems to me that even, I guess what I'm saying is it seems like they're going to have a hard time even meeting that. If I'm just being candid, like
got it.
They seem to me like they're still deer in the headlights. Like they're all kind of like, yeah, we know, and we don't have any plan for that yet, right? Like it doesn't.
A little bit. I mean, because we passed they call it BOCA here, but you could basically take any lot in the city of Spokane and turn them into high density. So I had a buddy took 4 individual lots and was able to put like 24 units because you're allowed, as long as you met setbacks, height requirements, parking requirements, right? You still have to meet those. But one of the issues is if you have just one lot, the setbacks from the setbacks off the property lines and the parking requirement limit what you can even put on them, because we're 50 foot wide by 120 deep on an average lot. And so it gets tight on that to put something of value. And so it's super interesting one. Is that kind of to piggyback Keith's question though, is that kind of where you see the opportunity? Like we're in the multifamily space. I think it's turning back into a little wealth tool that'll ride the wave the other way, but it's definitely softer right now. Rents are soft. But where we like it is that I think prices keep going up. I don't think there's a lid to pricing in either of our markets in the state of Washington. And I think we're still a great place to live, great place to be. So our single family, I think, is going to be quote unquote unaffordable. And so we feel like a lot of people are going to be driven to that apartment style, as much as I don't love it. But so we double down there. But do you see opportunities? But that's 5 years out before I see that being really good value.
Yeah. The one of the things I would recommend taking a look at is just multifamily permits as a whole, both nationally and then in the Spokane area. And we look at them here, of course, in the Seattle Metro. And what you saw was multifamily development applications essentially peaked right before the Fed started raising interest rates. And then, of course, since then, they've just been plummeting down. What that means, if history just replays itself, which it most likely will, is late this year and definitely in 2026, you'll start to see an artificial rise in rents just due to that lack of supply coming. So the question is, on the multifamily space, on the townhome space, even on the single family build to rent space, how can you properly position yourself to capitalize on that dip in supply that's coming and make a deal work at today's rates? So today it's an okay deal, at 9.5% construction and 7% perm or 7.5% on the perm. Unless it's a really big project, then it's like over $6 million. Then it's probably 6 to 5.5 on the permanent debt. But how do you make a project good today? So if it's good today and works today, and we know that in 24 months that debt's probably going to be cheaper and rents are probably going to be higher. So if I can make a pro forma work today and I can just get it going, I'll probably win significantly as the market rewards those other things. Now, don't bet on that. Just know that that's a bonus.
So would you buy a negative cash flow item today on that premise?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Still needs
No,
to
because
hit cash flow.
one,
Yeah.
because no one's going to give you a loan either. So when banks are right now have tightened up on everything, I was fighting with a community bank last week because we bought a house, we flipped it, and got an extra lot out of it. Built the single family, built the dadu next to it, and total value is probably 1.3, and we owe 620. But because debt's so expensive, it literally won't hit the debt service coverage ratio with a 30% expense. And so I just said to the banker, I said, I don't give a shit.
I was like, easy way to negotiate.
At 50% LTV, somebody's going to take this loan. So go get them to waive it.
Yeah.
I was like, so I think this is what it's going to come down to, is like building really good relationships with our banks and our lenders, having good conversations, getting deals to make sense today. And as they make sense today, just realize the market will reward you in the future as things change.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where it plays out. I guess for me, the amount of complexity that's happening with this kind of stuff is intriguing to me, because I feel like, I'm not going to include myself in this, but you guys are really smart guys. But you don't seem to me to have like a real clear answer, right? And I'm just like, I'm looking at our politicians and I'm looking at our policymakers, and I'm sitting here going, I don't know that anybody is really solution oriented or has a solution for this stuff. And so what I'm seeing is, it's like, even if it's staying the same or it's just getting worse, at some point I'm like, if we have a housing issue and it's getting more and more expensive to develop housing, whether that's multifamily or single family, right? It's just going to continue to get worse. But I guess at some point, like, something has to happen. And I guess I'm just curious as like what that is, like major revision in the policy world, or at the state level, or is it just going to be like people start moving elsewhere? Right? Like, does Washington become less attractive because it becomes so expensive? Like, at some point in time, I can't imagine you just stick your head in the sand and go, well, in 15 years, it's just going to figure itself out. Like, I just feel like there's got to be some sort of, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you're matching it with wage growth. Like, so the other side of it is employment. So salary wages just went up to, I believe it's just under 70. By 26, they'll be at 90 for a salaried employee. And so one of the downsides is we self-feed that growth. So to listeners that have a house and already own it, you're going to win, because it's going to keep forcing that value. The bigger question, I think what we're hovering around, is how do you keep it affordable for everybody else? I just heard, and this, don't quote me on this stat, but the average age of a first-time home buyer now is 38.
Crazy.
38. What if you didn't start? The middle class is gone at that point. If you're not starting that journey till 38, you don't even have time for it to compound or grow. And again, 38 is a starter home.
That's
like by 38, I had my fifth home. Not all at the same time, obviously, but and so I think one of the issues that we grapple with is value is going to go up. There's too many it's just such a beautiful area. We don't have major natural disasters. We have great power, it's going to keep growing. So the question is, how do you curb it? And so one big one I think I'm a proponent for is better condo laws. So we can build more condo setups. I think people would like that actually better than apartment living. And you could afford to do it, because we could build you a really nice, basically apartment, but you own it.
Yeah.
It's just the rules are, no builder wants, at least in Spokane, it's not worth that risk, because the sale price is going to be $250 to $300. Like you're not going to make enough to do it. But if you could mitigate that risk or insure against it, that's one area I see.
So I'm part of a political action committee, and like I'm on the board. And I think what everyone needs to do, Keith, to go back to your kind of original statement, is we have to get involved in politics on a local level, for mayor races, city council, county council, for commissioners, for school districts, utilities, all of those things, and get people in who and this is our mission, that support the middle class, support small business, police, fire, education, and housing. And the legislature is starting to realize that we are in a housing crisis. You even actually heard Bob Ferguson say that. And that's why, the middle housing and the ADU DADU bill passed, and why the lot splitting one might pass. So they're realizing it. They just don't realize like how to fix the problem. And it's a possibility that AI and form-based code may fix the problem, but that'll take, 20 years probably. And so during that 20-year, or maybe let's just be optimistic and say it takes 10. During the next decade, you're still going to experience outsized returns playing this game until they fix the problem. And I'm a proponent of fixing the problem because of a strong middle class. Keith, to go to what you're talking about, the Master Builders Association and multiple people were actually just working on the condo liability laws again, trying to make it so we could build essentially, you reference them as apartment style. Basically, they're just, traditionally speaking, you'd call them stacked condos. But yeah, essentially an apartment that's a condo. The class action attorneys in Washington State and then actually across most of the West Coast had a field day with those things. And so for one townhome project we were considering building out before we sold it as a development, it was 29 townhomes. And those 29 townhomes, the condo insurance to build it, just the insurance to construct it, was almost $190,000. So if that number, all of a sudden collapsed down, then you're absolutely correct. We could deliver that a good product at an affordable, but they've got to change the condo liability, the definition of condo, and allow it to be able to be an insurable product.
Yeah, my hope would be that, and they were on track with it, but it didn't actually play out like I thought. But where if you were under 2 stories and 12 units and under, you actually mitigated a bunch of it, but then they didn't mitigate the 2 biggest ones. But I was like, that would be an opportunity to get small investors involved again, to where you could actually create these awesome ones. The hard part we compete with, so what's great about the Seattle side is you gave the mountains and the sea, but if you go north, it's the most expensive real estate in the world. You go south, it's still pretty expensive real estate. So like you're kind of stacked there. The hard part is you go 20 minutes, we're in Idaho. And Idaho lets you build whatever. We're working on condo projects in Boise. We're working on them all over Idaho because you don't have that same liability, that same piece. And so we it's a tough one because we get hamstrung between them. So they predict the Rathdrum Prairie will be at more of a population growth, one of the highest population growths in the region, because you can go build at that kind of scale. And I think, to your point, I think I used to put my head in the sand to regulation. I'm like, it is what it is, right? Well, all of a sudden, do you know why they all spiked permit-wise? It's because Energy Code changed March 17th.
Yes.
So we submitted 15 permit applications. You know how many of those will build? 2?
Yeah.
1? Maybe? Because the cost didn't change. All I know is that if I submitted on March 18th, my cost would go up $5,000 a door. Yeah. For no better building.
Yeah.
Like we are building to what they call LEED standards as a base. And it's almost this piece where if you go to Idaho, it's just different standards to what you're building to. And so it's understand the intention. I understand, hey, save the environment. I understand those parts, but like we're now having to put EV air exchangers in our units because we build them so tight of a building envelope. We have to bring fresh air in. And I'm like, this is crazy. Now I got to pay to bring that out. If I would just had a leakier building, it would have vented itself. I'm like, this is crazy to me. And so it's those things where it's like, I wish you could just lay that out on a board and be like, hey, look, you're making me put this thing that conditions air so I have fresh air instead of using vents and windows, which worked for the last 20 years. It's because you made the building process. It's a really good building. It's super good building. It's just, I think that's to your point of like, it's like you have these double standards. One is always competing with the other.
I want to backstep real quick because I don't want to get lost in the weeds of commercial multifamily construction Fresh air return systems, which the first time I saw one, I did the same thing. I was like, what is that? I've been in a lot of buildings. I've never seen that. But backstepping a little bit, because you met we talked about this, I think it was like, again, over a year or so ago, Anton, but I'm curious if you would share with us and our listeners a little bit about it. But you said you're on the board of a PAC. And I think when we talked, you said you helped start the PAC, right? And I don't know if it's one PAC or multiple PACs, but a PAC is a political action committee, right?
Correct.
And you got very active, and you can correct everything I'm saying. I'm just giving a little premise here. You got very active in helping run campaigns for local city council people and mayor, all that kind of stuff. But you were giving me some stats of like what it took to actually win some of those races, or what it took to actually make an impact, to get a shot to win some of those races. How did that come about for you? And give us a little insight into that, because to me, it blew my mind, being somebody who kind of stuck my head in the sand about political stuff.
Me too.
And then realizing that you're that middle-aged guy at one point where you're like, oh, I'm the guy who has to actually do something about things now, because I'm in my 40s and I'm an adult and I'm supposed to
grow
I'm a business
up,
owner.
That's it. You're nailing it. We got to grow up and like make sure there's a world left for our kids.
Well, that's
and
what our
grandkids
grandpas did, right? And that's what our parents did. But I think being politically involved used to be something people were proud about, right? Your right to vote, knowing your local politicians, or your, being involved in your community. I bought an old Masonic lodge for a real estate office years ago and renovated it. And it was interesting talking to some of those Masons when I was doing that renovation. Some of them hated it, some of them liked it. But it was what the aha that I had one day when I was talking to one of them is, they lived in a world that didn't have social media, and they lived in a world that didn't have cell phones and connectivity like we do. So you can be a part of online communities now. You could actually be very communal and never leave your house if you wanted to, or if you were intentional about it. Back in the day, though, Masonic, temples, churches, community event, like people didn't see each other for like 3 months, and then they would look forward to going to like the church picnic, because they were like, man, I'm going to get to talk to 20 people today and say, well, how's life, and how's little Johnny, or what's going on, or, who broke their leg on a horse. Like it was a way for people to stay connected, but also people looked forward to it. And so there was this kind of like, get involved, have conversations, know what's going on. And all of a sudden society kind of went this other direction, and to the point where I think a lot of young kids now are intentionally not getting involved. They don't want, I don't want to be bothered with that. Someone else will deal with that. That's for the birds. That's a waste of my time. And really, then we're in this situation we're in now. So when you started talking to me about the PAC, I was like, not only was I fascinated, I was also like, God, Keith, you need to get your ass in here. Like, I'm not participating at this level at all. So tell me a little bit about that journey and give us some insight.
Yeah. One, I did not start it. I just became a member of the board, and before I did that, I was involved in a couple other campaigns, but not as a member of a political action committee. I got to make that part really clear. So when you're in a political action committee, you can spend money on advertising, you can do promotions, but you can't get directly involved in running someone's campaign or something of that nature. Now, having said that, when you're not, you can just have a discussion as a regular citizen. Here's what I've noticed is that you run into amazing people who want to make a difference in the community, and they just don't know how. And what they need to do is they need to do like Keith and Jordan are doing here, and they need to do a weekly Facebook Live. They need to do, they don't have to go do all the door knocking they used to do. They need to do something to connect with their community, number one. But number two, what's really interesting is some of these local races, I think what people don't realize is they are won with just a few $1,000s sometimes. And so if someone with nefarious purposes, because they do come in with nefarious purposes too, spends $5,000-$10,000 promoting some ideological idea and gets enough people to acknowledge that, that's totally possible. So the only thing that we're trying to fight for is just some common sense. And what's funny is I would say we're moderate, conservative, most of us, but we don't We don't care if you're the pink fluffy unicorn party, the Democrat, the Republican. Do you support those issues, which we believe actually helps the community? And so, with a little bit of encouragement and the right people and a few $1,000s, you can massively change local races. And so I think if you wanted to get involved, it's about, one, starting to understand who the players are and what the big issues are, number one. Number two, who's actually going to run a good campaign and how much are they going to spend? And number three, how do you get the message out there in your community for candidate X, who is going to support, getting us more affordable housing so the first-time home buyer doesn't have to be 38. That's ridiculous.
So who, in your opinion, who are the major players and what are the major issues?
I think there's going to be, what's funny is when we're talking about this on a local level, your major players would be, if there's 5 city council seats, having 3 of them that are going to go in the direction of awesome middle class, small business, police, fire, education. And once again, those are just our issues. But you don't have to win every single one of them. You just need a majority to vote that way. Nate Nearing, just to use an example, is the head of the Snohomish County Council. He's up for re-election this year. Phenomenal human. He's one of the people, Jordan, that shows up and plays soccer with us, on Saturday mornings. He's been an amazing asset to the community. We went to his little re-election thing. I'll donate a little money and just tell him thank you for being a part of it. So I think it's getting to know them and knowing that it doesn't take like every seat, but it takes a few people pushing in the right direction. And then you start to see that positive change start to show up 12, 24, 36 months later.
It's that long game, man.
It is. Game. Yeah, for sure. At what point in your real estate investment career did you realize that was a key piece of continued real estate development? Like the getting involved? Because when you're flipping a house, there's not a lot of involvement. Like I even think of my journey now where I look at it, but now most of my decisions are around, can I change the comp plan? Can we move roads? Is there enough infrastructure? And it was like hit me where I'm like, you can't sit around and wait for them to decide. So at what point kind of at that journey of that real estate investment did you realize, hey, that's a key piece of our future?
Coming out of the great financial crisis, I really started to understand that as we started getting moving again, because to be honest, I was in a 7-digit hole. And so as I'm digging myself out of that one, I started kind of loosely getting involved. And then all of a sudden when COVID happened and there was a limiting of rights and expression, I started getting a lot involved because, the old adage of like, if you're attacking me and my family, like it opened my eyes. I started massively paying attention right at that time. That's when I was not on a PAC and I helped in 2 campaigns. One of them I raced over 7 digits for and ran a bunch of their stuff because it needed to be done. They didn't win, and that's fine. But I learned an unbelievable lot about the machine because I was emotionally motivated. One of my mentors is the one who started the PAC that I'm a part of, and he said, "Hey, we need you to come be a part of this. We need younger thoughts and younger energy on how to attract new people." And I said, "So you've never used social media or text message to anyone before? Is that what you're saying?"
Yeah, basically. Jeez.
I think I was naive and I was comfortable and I was making phenomenal money. And then when the great financial crisis happened, all of a sudden when you get whacked, you start paying attention. And that was really the cause of it, is everything got taken away because of decisions that were outside of my control. So I started looking around and going, well, what else is outside of my control? And I started realizing, Jordan, then, and I'd always been paying attention to it, but I started really realizing the impact of local legislation at the city and the county level, how much it impacts people, business, family, and housing. I couldn't believe it. So, for example, as you guys want to help push through middle housing and the DADU stuff, one of the things that you want to look for is like, what's the level of impervious surface that they're going to allow? I can tell you want it to be 55% or more.
Yeah.
Didn't know that a little bit ago. At what level are things going to have to be sprinklered, or what's considered alley access? What's the setbacks from the power lines? The problem with land development is you don't even know what you don't know until it costs you a bag of money.
And you're halfway in the deal at that point.
Yeah, it almost needs to be in like an AA type group for it, where land developers of just sharing that story. You're right. It's a big difference, and people think it's not, but like that's why everybody's like, "Sweet, look, you can build anything on a lot," and I'm like, "Well, you can't. But it's great, but like you can't. Like it's still got to fit all of these parameters that are in there. But it's a good step forward, to your point, right?
Yeah,
it's at least moving in the right direction.
Well, and to that end, right? Like there's just so many things that even the more you learn and the more experience you have, it almost makes it worse because you think you should know them, and you get into the next project and you're like, well, how did I not see that coming, or how did I not know that, right? And there's just so many little nuance and impact fees and the size of, where's the water, where's the sewer, how far away is it, when was the last time it's been updated, do they even have the ability to, there's so much that goes into it that I think that's one of the big hurdles that gets people from not even getting in the business, right? Or not even getting in the industry. And then number two, it's the thing that gets so many people out of it, right? It's because it's like, man, I'm really playing a game with so many variables. Like maybe I just go play this other game that's a little simpler, a little easier, a little bit more straightforward because it is so ambiguous in so many ways.
Yeah, well, and it's even better. Like a perfect example of being involved is look at the growth management boundary. So anybody listening, you can pull it up. It's a map. It's not a straight line like a school district. That thing jogs in and out of parcels, up and down parcels. And
sometimes it cuts them in half.
It's when I look at it, I'm like, that's somebody, it's a landowner who was concerned, did their part to get that line included. And my only experience with it was when Ben Stocker was in office, and I was like, we need more multifamily tax exemptions. Yeah, people will build if they do it. So I sat down with him in a meeting, and to his credit, he literally voted to move the line the next week. Yeah. And now all of West Central is included in that. Now the whole city is, but it's those things where you're like, you don't know sometimes. You just assume that's what it's supposed to be until you go sit down and say, hey, does this make sense?
Yeah.
And it's that point of like, hey, we need affordable housing. And then they pass 50 things that increase the cost of housing. And then we sit on these and everybody's like, why can't you guys are making all this money? Why can't you create affordable housing? I said, one time, I'm going to do it one time. And I'm going to literally show my budget sheet of what I spent on one of my projects and how much I make. Because I'm like, it is not what you think. I'm riding away, to your point, I'm looking at 2930. So projects for mine are a little thin, but I think we're going to hit that same supply curve issue. So, but I agree a ton. I think it's just somebody else will take care of it. And then you realize it's not going to happen. So one of the things I would like the listeners to consider that Washington State is actually stealing your property rights and taking from you via land use legislation, via tree ordinances, via setbacks. So if you have a piece of property and there's a wetland on it and you're currently using it, but you're all of a sudden, for some reason or another, you stop maintaining it, and you used to be able to get right up next to that, the edge of the creek, for example. Now all of a sudden that creek has a 150 foot, 250 foot setback coming off of it because it's no longer in use. And I think the average homeowner doesn't realize that. Actually, this morning,
I looked at a piece of property. It was 2.5 acres. It happens to have a fish-bearing stream that comes kind of right across the north of it. And so I dropped it into one of the GIS maps that has just a tool, hit the LiDAR so I could see where the edge of the creek was. And I just pulled the measurement tool right off of it. You can't even get the existing structures outside of the buffer. I was like, you have 2.5 acres, it's unusable. And they're like, well, wait a second. We donated 5 acres to the city next to it. And I was like, well, we shouldn't have done that. I was like, part of what you donated was usable and what you have left is unusable. So if the average consumer is worried about their property, they should get involved in this and start learning to protect it today, because the government will take your property rights from you via this type of legislation.
Yeah, I have an 18-acre parcel, actually, North Spokane. 5 acres of it can't be built on. And already, so I know that, and I'm like, maybe I can get him to call it green space, so I can meet my green space requirements. But you don't think about it. You're like, no, I got 18 acres. Nope, can't really touch about 5 of 6, almost 6 of that.
I'm getting, we are encroaching on a buffer. So it's called buffer averaging, where you can come in a little bit on one side, it extends a little bit on another. The state's thinking about getting rid of that. If the state gets rid of buffer averaging, you'll lose about 20 to 30% of all buildable land in Washington state. With this buffer averaging, I did what's called innovative development design, which means you go above and beyond in order to fix what you've done. And I'm totally cool with this, but I essentially donated 3 more acres in one spot, and then I'm planting 2,200 trees.
Wow.
Jeez.
Yeah. And so someone was asking, like, man, how are you going to do that? I was like, I'm going to buy a bunch of saplings. I'm going to grab my kids. I'm going to grab my friends and their kids, and we're going to go tree planting for like 3 days.
It's a great Keller Williams volunteer activity, actually.
Come on over. The barbecue started. Here's some trees. Let's go.
Well, and especially on the west side, because you have so many of those other, really federal and state limitations. We don't deal with as many of those. I don't know how much it would hit the Spokane stuff, but it's a really big deal.
Yeah.
But nobody knows that, right? You just said buffer averaging, and most people are thinking about download speeds on their next streaming app, right? But if you own land, buffer averaging is a big difference. Green space requirements, big difference. All of a sudden, I think in the valley, but you can only build on 40% you can only cover 40% of the land, up to 50 sometimes. You don't think about that really. On a 6-acre site, I can only put buildings on 3 of them.
Well, let me blow your mind with this stat. How much of Washington state is actually covered with some type of structure or road? What percent?
Cool. Because you set it up, I'm gonna go with 18.
I'm gonna say something like 12.
4.
4?
Jeez. We got a lot
4% of the whole state. So this is what's crazy. We actually have, in our state, we're one of the least built out, with the most actual open green space, with the most trees, the most water. We're the most environmentally friendly. But yet we can't get a little bit of land to support the middle class. Yeah. Come freaking on.
Yeah.
And so Logan Matashami, from Housing Wire, I probably butchered his last name. He's a good economist. When he gets asked on their thing, why are we not building starter homes even across the United States? His answer was, builders are not the march of dimes. And the truth is, for us to get starter homes back in Washington state, we're going to have to create some type of incentive or tax break or something for us to be able to build attainable housing. I don't like the word affordable housing. Affordable housing means a crappy little rental. I want attainable housing for a strong middle class.
Yeah,
there's my soapbox.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where you said you just as the you tend to be partial to roles that you play, obviously, but being in the real estate world for as long as I have been, primarily played an agent, right? Like as an agent, was helping people. But at that point in time, you're so far down the road of the creation of the house. You know, you're helping sell existing houses, and then you start maybe working into new construction. But really, you go to the front line, and that's that developer, right? It's the person who's developing the land. And I think that's where when you start looking at these projects, if a developer does a project and it's like you buy the land or you raise the capital and you do all the planning. The reality is when the project goes through, everybody gets paid, right? Like the engineer's going to get paid, the architect's going to get paid, the construction workers are going to get paid, the realtors get paid. But at the end of the day, the developer gets paid last, meaning like all of this stuff, like the permits have to be paid. Like everybody has to get, so it doesn't make any sense to go, yeah, they're not the March of Dimes. It's like, right? Like if I'm going to leverage $1 million and I'm going to get back $1 million, but everybody else gets paid. It's like, well, that doesn't work, right? So there has to be a margin in the development game. And I think that's the issue right now is you have so many competing interests that on their own accord, I think are doing, somebody's just saying, hey, we have to be more socially responsible. We have to be more, green. We have to be more, but you start putting all these things together and it's like, well, you can't have electric car charging stations and air recirculation and solar panels and, only build on 40% of the land and have impermeable surface of 30%. And, it's like you start to put all these things together and it just makes it unfeasible. And I think that's where this little podcast that me and Jordan got going, chess, not checkers, right? That's that whole thing of like, man, it is a chess match for sure in the 100%. Development world. Like you are really just playing this big game of chess and there are so many players and so many variables and so many people wanting so many different things that then when you find those deals, that actually makes sense. I think that then they also take time, right? It can't happen overnight because now you have all of this, I mean, I don't know, like what your guys' experiences are, but I think the time frame to get projects through, even after you spend all these times vetting projects and you finally find one that works, and that if you go full steam ahead on that, it's not going to happen for 18 months. It's not going to happen for 24 months. You might not even get a permit for 2 years. That to me is an area where we could definitely make some impact. Like it makes zero sense to me that when a developer decides to greenlight a project and go through the process, that just red tape and bureaucracy are going to make that take 18 months. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah,
Master Builders. Oh, I was just going to give you, like some data around that. Master Builders, had put out. And they did this in 23, so this is not numbers for 24. They have not updated it. But the number when they included entitlements and all of that is basically a little over 30% of the cost of the home in the state of Washington is just delays, mitigation fees, and time. So if you wanted to drop your housing costs by a third, instead of that taking 18 months, what if it took 8 weeks? What if the form-based code? What if I literally submit the PDF of the site plan and then AI just read it, crams it through the code real quick and says, hey, here's 5 things that don't quite meet it, goes over to a human. Human goes, all right, look at these 5 things. Here's 3 options to fix each one of these 5 things, and then kicks it back.
Yeah, and in reality, that takes 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we're fast over here compared to what you do over there. I mean, we can move through Seattle in 2 years is probably your average timeline.
Some of your stuff just gets ridiculous. I've been working on. I'm coming up on year 4 on one.
4? Oh,
4 years.
No, that's tough. I like how you laugh about it though. That's good.
Yeah, it was a laugh with some pain behind it, though.
And I think like if we want housing to be more affordable, we have to speed this up. We've got to make it similar. So, for instance, when you go into every city and municipality in the state of Washington, they should all have the same guidelines and the same code, so it's not arbitrary when I move from one to the other. Another thing I was reading, Jordan, just to kind of give you another little crazy nugget, there are 770 different versions of land development code inside of the U.S. as a whole. So the federal government on a certain level needs to be like, this is the base of your code, and add any regulations on top of it and just squish that down such that we wouldn't have so many different versions. Because, I mean, what's it like going to Idaho and going to one part of Spokane, the other part of Spokane?
It's completely different. The valley's different than Liberty Lake, which is different than city of Spokane,
which is different than the county.
It's different. And the hard part about it is also that the code isn't absolute. So then what happens is you'll get in that jurisdiction, and like I'm in Boise, and the first guy I talked to probably had a great morning, probably had a fun weekend with his kids, showed up on Monday and loved my apartment deal. So we had started entitling down an apartment road. Well, this other guy who came in, because they have so much turnover in that position, goes, wait, we can't put apartments there. And I'm like, we just are going, yeah, but you didn't have it in writing. And Todd's not here anymore. And I'm like, just get some consistency. Like, I think it's, to your point, it's that predictability, because now I got to bake into my pricing 2 years of carry cost.
Wow. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that subjectivity, so to speak, shouldn't exist. Right?
No,
like it really shouldn't.
And if it does, it should favor affordable development. I think the issue is it doesn't. And then you start going into these markets, because ours are really good SFR markets. And so you go build, and like townhomes down in Boise, the one I'm looking at, sell for $625. It's nice, but single families at $8. So you just kind of constantly are moving within that. And I think somebody once told me this. They said it's tough when a fundamental human need is also a great investment.
100%, yes.
And I was like, that makes a ton of sense. Right? Because investors are only getting in because you have to hit the return. But everybody needs a place to live.
Yeah.
And I think the only part I push the city on a ton is like, okay, right now this piece of land, because it's valued at land, let's call it $1 million worth of land. You're getting $6-7 grand a month in property taxes. Well, that piece of dirt I can put 100 homes on, and now you're going to get $480,000. And so I'm like, how can you not leverage that future tax revenue? And so there's TIFs and little things like that. But I was like, how can you not do that for developers? You lower my cost of money, I can build you a better house faster and cheaper. And so I think it's sometimes thinking a little outside the box in a system that is more CYA than, there's not a better term for creative. There's not a better term for creative. Otherwise, I'd try to come with some acronym. But I think it's a little bit of that conversation. And it was never a problem when rates are 3%. So
yeah, because cheap debt made everyone smart.
Exactly. And it's the Warren Buffett, know who's naked when the tide goes out. And I think that's kind of, I fell a little bit victim to it. You're like, man, why would they ever raise rates? This is great. And then I literally had projects under contract March of 22, contingent on completion, that finished September of 22. Rates went up 5%.
Nice, yeah.
I think I lost $6 million of value, $7 million of value in 7 months.
Yeah.
No different building, no different set. It's just the debt to acquire. And I think our hope on here is I want to kind of enlighten people to that, whether you ever develop or don't, just truly understanding the cost of a home to get that from a piece of dirt to something. So,
yeah.
Well, I think this podcast today is like, the message is like, A, get involved.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
At a local level. I don't think you have to get involved at a huge level, but even at a local level. And number two is, even if you're not getting totally involved, but like being more aware when you are, even if you're uninvolved in the candidates and the campaigns and the political side of things, just even when you're voting, understanding that when you're checking a box about something that you need to understand the bigger picture, or at least have some basis for it before you check that box. Because I think a lot of people look at stuff, and the wording on ballots, but it's just like, save the seagulls. Sure, save the seagulls. It's like, well,
sounds good.
What does it affect? What how do these dominoes play out? And I think that's been my aha. I think in my middle-aged life is like, man, we all look back and say, man, I was an idiot, or I was so naive, or whatever. But just getting more middle-aged, I'm like, oh god, like there's so much more that goes into this. So that's the first aha. Then the second aha is, okay, now what do I do about it? How do I get involved? What's the strategic way? Who do I talk to? And that's one of the reasons that I value these conversations, Anton, with you and with Jordan. Is just you guys you're clearly thinking about these things and rolling them around and having conversations with other people about them. So it's great for you guys to share that, because I think for our listeners and even for me, it's just like, man, it's hard to make decisions or have conversations about affordable housing when you're not the one creating affordable housing.
Yeah. You just want it to be affordable.
Yeah.
Right. That's way different.
Yeah. So maybe you should talk to the people who are actually helping create the affordable housing and the woes that they're having, or the hurdles, or the getting the ideas and the feedback of what could be different. So.
Yeah. Well, and the assumption is you're making so much money. D.R. Horton's killing it, making all this money. Well, it's because they don't use interest, so they don't have to pay carry costs. They have their own crews, so they build it for cheaper, right? And they're still not making a ton, right? And it's just volume. And I think that's the assumption is, look, you're building a house, they're making all this money on it. I'm like, it's pretty thin margins in a lot of the scenarios, unless the market does something great. But I think for next couple of years, you can't anticipate that. So
you've got to be able to survive on the thin margins and essentially the base hits, especially for the next couple of years. Keith, I think fundamentally our education system is failing us because we, as a society, lack the ability to break things down into first principles and then to consider second order and third order effects.
Yeah, I was listening to your podcast, and I'd love for you to expand on that, Anton. But one of the things I love is you talk about first principle thinking. So talk to us a little bit about that. But the other thing is you kind of pair this first principle thinking with you have an outlook about life should be a little bit difficult and do hard things.
Amen,
right?
brother.
And I feel like those are the two things. Like, well, they're so unintuitive, but also not taught in, like you said, today's educational systems. But even in today's society, it's like we run away from hard things or things are difficult, and we don't necessarily use first principle thinking. And I think you speak about both of them very eloquently. But when you put the two together, it's like that's what I want for my kids.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I want for this generation soon to come, and that's what they need. So I mean, tell me about your basis in both those things, or
well, so I think the first one comes back to my family. When my dad grew up a potato farmer over there in Quincy, and when you're a farmer, no one's coming to save you. You will fix it. You will solve the problem. You will go, why is this not working? What's the fundamental issue? How do I get to the fundamental issue? Now affect that so I can get X done. And that's all first principles thinking is breaking something down to a fundamental issue and getting very simple on the root of the cause and then working on that. So when we talk about land development, the simplest thing that we can work on that's part of the root cause is local politics. Because local politics are the ones who pass the laws who then affect us. Cool. Well, let's get involved in local politics. The do hard things comes also, from a family. My dad was the youngest of 13. And when his dad passed away, when he was like 23, they said, hey, by the way, you're actually number 13. You're not number 12. We couldn't afford to feed number 12. So we just gave him away. And my dad's like,
should live this story.
So there's this idea. And then my mom came here from Finland. And unfortunately, parents weren't able to take care of her, so she was sent to America for a better life, but actually bounced in and out of the foster care system in kind of downtown Seattle until she met my wonderful adopted grandma. But both of those people have taught me that nothing was ever guaranteed to be easy. And matter of fact, if you choose the easy route, you're never going to get the result you'd want. And that if you simply go, what is the fundamental issue in this problem and how do I solve it? And then how do I have a little bit of grit, a little tenacity? How do I walk around with a backpack on with a giant freaking rock in it just for fun?
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to do
only
that,
a crazy man would do that, right?
And then sign up for events where you do it on purpose.
Yeah.
That seems great.
It is. I can tell you this, and I think one of the big things for me that I realize is it's just literally talking about it. It's sharing it. It's having the conversations. I think that does so much. For me, when COVID happened, I stumbled upon a book, and I'd been introduced to it before, but it was like my great grandfather wrote a genealogy book, and I think it wasn't supposed to be like a diary. It's supposed to be more like a genealogy, like this person had this person, but it kind of turned into this story. And so COVID lockdown, right? I read this book, but this is just like, and I'm not trying to make my great grandfather out to be this hero, but like I feel like all of our great grandfathers are like these heroes, and compared to today,
100%.
right? Yeah. But it was just one of those things where it was. I just remember after reading this story, feeling. Like I needed to be more of a figure in society. I needed to be more of a man. I needed to have, better principles, only because it was inspiring. And it wasn't an inspiring story in the sense of, it wasn't political. He didn't run for office. He didn't save a bunch of people and nothing like it. Was just like he had a hard life. Yeah. Right. And it was his parents, mom died early, and his parents, like said, had all the kids, whatever. At one point, he got put on a horse at like 12 to go to a neighboring town to get a cousin to come watch him because his dad was injured and his mom has passed. And I just remember reading that little section and thinking, can you imagine putting a 12-year-old kid on a horse and then smacking it on the butt and being like, go 7 miles that way and get your cousin? Yeah.
Bingo.
And that wasn't even like a miraculous thing.
No.
That was just life, and that was a Tuesday, yeah. And so I'm reading this going, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But that was so common. Yeah. And that's just one little, everything in that little genealogy was like, man, for him to get to like age 25 was like 40 miracles. Yeah.
I mean, average life was like 38 because of that, right? Yeah. So.
And I just think, today for me anymore, it's just sharing those things. It's talking about them. Yeah. It's getting people to have the realization that like, hey, man, maybe life's not supposed to be easy. And as a matter of fact, maybe there's some pride and maybe there's some growth and hard. And
Amen.
And I think that the trick then becomes, or what I'm trying to figure out is great realization, but now I almost have to like artificially create it, which goes to the rock in the backpack and walking
Bingo.
through the for no reason.
Yeah. So a couple things I want to throw in here is one of our mentors, Gary. He said something that struck me, back in the great financial crisis when Gary Keller said, he said something to the effect, I'm probably going to butcher this, but it was something like, my son will grow up the son of a rich man, so it's my job to put hardship in his way and struggles in his way so that he realizes life isn't easy. So I've also kind of thought the same way. My dad had all these colloquialisms. And so I tell my kids these colloquialisms. Stetner's never quit, never surrender, never back down, always try. Failure is your forward. And then like, what did you fail at today? What did you win at today? What did you learn? And then as we go to bed, I always tell them, hey, tell me something good. What was fun today? Because I want them to think with joy as they go to bed, and I also want to know like what they struggled with. So if we're having that as our conversation, we're putting that into the mental psyche. Number two, by you walking around with a backpack full of rocks, even though they may go, Dad is weird, they go,
definitely do.
Dad does hard stuff, and that's modeling the behavior. And they're always going to do what we do, not what we say. Yeah. And one of my friends pointed out the other day, they said, hey, your whole family's fit and works out. I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. And then they go, you've done a good job modeling that behavior. And I was like, oh, well, thank you. That's really nice. But I really sat there and thought about it. And I was like, well, we have modeled that behavior really well. And so whatever we're doing, they're going to repeat. So how do we model that behavior? How do we teach that tenacity? How do we talk to them about the problems, the struggles, and then how we overcame them? So if you had the hard day and you sat down at the dinner table and they said, how's your day? And you're like, honestly, it was a hard day. I think that's an opportunity to not sugarcoat that conversation and to have a real conversation. This was the obstacle. This is what we did. This was the way forward. This was the outcome. I experienced stress. I cried, whatever it may be. But I think we're in the desire to shelter our children. We're not having enough of these kind of consistent, real conversations. I love my son. We were having a conversation the other day. He's he plays Premier Soccer for Rush as a keeper on not on the national team, but on their Rush team. And he's a sophomore, and he's trying out for high school. He's like, I know I made the JV. I don't think I'm going to make varsity. I might get to play a little bit of varsity. We'll see. I said, okay. Is the other keeper better than you? He goes, no. I said, be real. And he goes, I don't know. I said, well, you can whine about it. You can complain about it. Or you can work harder and go back and win and figure out how to do it and how to make it happen and how to overcome this. Would you like extra coaching? Do you want to work out with me? Do you need me to find you someone? Do you want to be victorious? Or do you just want to do it? He goes, okay, Dad, I don't need a speech, but yeah, okay, I'll work.
I don't need the speech, but yeah. It's cool, man. Raising humans is cool.
It's hard.
It's hard, and it's. I always just see the word unintuitive. It's so unintuitive.
Yeah.
Right. My natural inclination, especially with my daughter, is to protect her. I think my son, I can watch that dude run into a sliding glass door and laugh. I'm like, ah! But with my daughter, I'm like, oh, sweetheart, are you okay? But I have to intentionally draw those lines between, like, me and my wife talk about this all the time. I'm like, it's not being mean. It's letting them live through hardship, right? And not just swooping in and all the time. And it's tough, man. But man, so valuable. And
Awesome.
it's nice to hear that other people are mean to their kids too.
That's a good sign.
As you should be.
Awesome.
We have a controlled environment, and it's a protected environment. It's an environment of love. So let's make parts of it maybe a little difficult at times, because the world won't love them when it makes it difficult.
For sure.
Awesome.
Well, Anton, man, thank you so much.
Super good.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen.
Before we sign off here real quick, where can people find you? What?
You can Google my name and find any of the social medias. They're all at Anton Stetner. Our website is resg.com. Our phone number is 425-249-0214. Love to chat with you.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. And guys will put links to those in the show notes so that you have them. And if you guys haven't heard Anton, make sure you give him a listen. I love talking to you, Anton. Look forward to doing it again soon, man.
All right.
Sounds good,
sir.
All right, you guys. Thanks for listening to today's episode. While you're out there, would you please do us a favor and give us a like, subscribe, or a follow, whether you listen on Spotify, iTunes, or YouTube. We'd really appreciate it. Also, if you don't mind while you're there, give us a 5-star review. Maybe write a review. If you have a favorite episode, feel free to give it a like. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate it.